International financial practices. The financial principles which apply to the relationships between different countries are an expansion of those which apply within a single country. When goods are exchanged between countries, they must be paid for by commodities or gold. They cannot be paid for by the notes, certificates, and checks of the purchaser's country, since these are of value only in the country of issue. To avoid shipment of gold with every purchase, bills of exchange are used. These are claims against a person in another country, which are sold to a person in the same country. The latter will buy such a claim if he wants to satisfy a claim against himself held by a person in the other country. He can satisfy such a claim by sending to his creditor in the other country the claim which he has bought against another person in that other country, and let his creditor use the claim to satisfy his own claim. Thus, instead of importers in one country sending money to exporters in another country, importers in one country pay their debts to exporters in their own country, and their creditors in the other's country receive payment for the goods they have exported from importers in their own country. Thus, payment for goods in an international trade is made by merging single transactions involving two persons into double transactions involving four persons. In many cases, payment is made by involving a multitude of transactions, frequently in several different countries. These transactions were carried on in the so-called foreign exchange market. An exporter of goods sold bills of exchange into that market and thus drew out of it money in his own country's units. An importer bought such bills of exchange to send to his creditor, and thus he put his own country's monetary units into the market. Since the bills available in any market were drawn the monetary units of many different foreign countries, there arose exchange relationships between the amounts of money available in the country's own units, put there by importers, and the variety of bills drawn in foreign monies and put into the market by exporters. The supply and demand of the country's own money available in the foreign exchange market determined the value of the other country's money in relation to domestic money. These values could fluctuate widely for countries not on the gold standard, but only narrowly, as we shall see, for those on gold. Under normal conditions, a foreign exchange market served to pay for goods and services of foreigners without an international shipment of money, gold. It also acted as a regulator of international trade. If the imports of any country steadily exceeded exports to another country, more importers would be in the market offering domestic money for bills of exchange drawn in the money of their foreign creditor. There thus would be an increased supply of domestic money and an increased demand for that foreign money. As a result, importers would have to offer more of their money for these foreign bills, and the value of domestic money would fall, while the value of the foreign money would rise in the foreign exchange market. This rise or fall on a gold relationship would be measured in terms of par, the exact gold content equivalent of the two currencies. As the value of the domestic currency sagged below par in relationship to that of some foreign currency, domestic importers to that foreign country will increase their activities, because when they receive payment in the form of a bill exchange, they can sell it for more of their own currency than they usually expect, and can thus increase their profits. A surplus of imports, by lowering the foreign exchange value of the importing country's money, will lead eventually to an increase in exports, which, by providing more bills of exchange, will tend to restore the relationship of the monies back toward par. Such a restoration of parity in foreign exchange will reflect a restoration of balance in international obligations, and this in turn will reflect a restored balance in the exchange of goods and services between the two countries. This means, under normal conditions, that a trade disequilibrium will create trade conditions which will tend to restore trade equilibrium. But when countries are on the gold standard, the result is quite different. In this case, the value of a country's money will never go below the amount equal to the cost of shipping gold between the two countries. An importer who wishes to pay his trade partner in the other country will not offer more and more of his own country's money for foreign exchange bills, but will bid up the price of such bills only to the point where it becomes cheaper for him to buy gold from a bank and pay the costs of shipping and insurance on the gold as it goes to his foreign creditor. Thus, on the gold standard, foreign exchange quotations do not fluctuate widely, but move only between the two gold points, which are only slightly above gold export point and slightly below gold import point, parity, the legal gold relationship of the two currencies. Since the cost of packing, shipping, and insuring gold used to be about 0.5% of its value, the gold export and import points were about this amount above and below the parity point. In the case of the dollar-pound relationship, when parity was at 4.866, the gold export point was about 4.885, and the gold import point was about 4.845. Thus, gold export point equals 4.885. Excess demand for bills by importers, parity was set at 4.866. Gold import point 4.845. Excess supply of bills by exporters. The situation which we have described is overly simplified. In practice, the situation is made more complicated by several factors. Among these are the following. 1. Middlemen buy and sell foreign exchange for present or future delivery as a speculative activity. 2. The total supply of foreign exchange available in the market depends on much more than the international exchange of commodities. It depends on the sum total of all international payments, such as interest, payment for services, tourist spending, borrowings, sales of securities, immigrant remittance, and so on. 3. The total exchange balance depends on the total of the relationships of all countries, not merely between two. The flow of gold from country to country, resulting from unbalanced trade, tends to create a situation which counteracts the flow. If a country exports more than it imports so that gold flows in to cover the difference, this gold will become the basis for an increased quantity of money, and this will cause a rise of prices within the country sufficient to reduce exports and increase imports. At the same time, the gold, by flowing out of some other country, will reduce the quantity of money there and will cause a fall in prices within that country. These shifts in prices will cause shifts in the flow of goods, because of the obvious fact that goods tend to flow to higher-priced areas and cease to flow to lower-priced areas. These shifts in the flow of goods will counteract the original unbalance in trade, which caused the flow of gold. As a result, the flow of gold will cease. An imbalanced international trade at slightly different price levels will result. The whole process illustrates the subordination of internal price stability to stability of exchanges. It was this subordination which was rejected by most countries after 1931. This rejection was signified by A. Abandonment of the gold standard, at least in part, B. Efforts at control of domestic prices, and C. Efforts at exchange control. All these were done because of a desire to free the economic system from the restricting influence of a gold-dominated financial system. This wonderful automatic mechanism of international payments represents one of the greatest social instruments ever devised by man. It requires, however, a very special group of conditions for its effective functioning, and, as we shall show, these conditions were disappearing by 1900 and were largely wiped away as a result of the economic changes brought about by the First World War. Because of these changes, it became impossible to restore the financial system which had existed before 1914. Efforts to restore it were made with great determination, but by 1933 they had obviously failed, and all major countries had been forced to abandon the gold standard and automatic exchanges. When the gold standard is abandoned, gold flows between countries like any other commodity, and the value of foreign exchanges, no longer tied to gold, can fluctuate much more widely. In theory, an unbalance of international payments can be rectified either through a shift in exchange rates or through a shift in internal price levels. On the gold standard, this rectification is made by shifts in exchange rates only between the gold points. When the unbalance is so great that exchanges would be forced beyond the gold points, the rectification is made by means of changing internal prices caused by the fact that gold flows at the gold points, instead of the exchanges passing beyond the gold points. On the other hand, when a currency is off the gold standard, fluctuation of exchanges is not confined between any 2 points, but can go indefinitely in either direction. In such a case, the unbalance of international payments is worked out largely by a shift in exchange rates, and only remotely by shifts in internal prices. In the period of 1929 to 1936, the countries of the world went off gold because they preferred to bring their international balances toward equilibrium by means of fluctuating exchanges rather than by means of fluctuating price levels. They feared these last because changing, especially falling, prices led to declines in business activity and shifts in the utilization of economic resources, such as labor, land, and capital, from one activity to another. The re-establishment of the balance of international payments when a currency is off gold can be seen from an example. If the value of the pound sterling falls to $4 or $3, Americans will buy in England increasingly because English prices are cheap for them. But Englishmen will buy in America only with reluctance because they have to pay so much for American money. This will serve to rectify the original excess of exports to England, which gave the great supply of pound sterling necessary to drive its value down to $3. Such a depreciation in the exchange value of a currency will cause a rise in prices within the country as a result of the increase in demand for the goods of that country.